interesting findings that we read in the report. So the report's main conclusion is that financial resources are available, but they are not optimally used, and recommends drastic reforms of the international financing system, including updating debt restructuring mechanism, African risk assessment models, and aid conditionalities. I mean, all of these are very interesting terms. Can you elaborate on this and precisely what is needed?
I want to appreciate really the quality of this report led by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. A couple of elements really we need to look at. Currently, we are really at a juncture regarding financing for development. When we look at the African context, huge demographic growth, the youngest population in the world. By 2030, the African youth will represent 40% of the global youth. So there is an important pressure to address financing for development on the continent. But to do that, of course, we need also the international financing system to be at the level of those ambitions. Therefore, in the reforms we have been talking about, not only from the report from Mo Ibrahim Foundation, but the reform even we have been conducting at the World Bank, actually, what we are looking at is, I would say, a triptych, three-dimension: speed, scale, and impact. So we need to make sure that the available resources are accessible on time for the countries. So we need to look at how the MDBs, the development banks, the partners, are very diligent in processing those resources. This is one. The scale is, we don't longer want to have spread small amounts here and here. We need to look at how to make the economic transformation on the African economies. And then, of course, the impact, the longer term response, and I will say even the sustainable response. But to do that, of course, you need also, looking on the African perspective, more representation in the global financing architecture. Because in most cases, those decisions are made with Africans sometimes being in the room, but less vocal or less heard.
Mm-hmm. So illicit financial capital is one of the issues that has been highlighted. And the report says it proposes to stem the flow of IFC, which could increase resources by $1 billion. And this amount is even greater than the official development assistance, which is about $81 billion. So how can we combat capital flight? And is it through prior investment in specific areas?
Well, we need to look at it, of course, in different dimensions. Of course, investment, looking at what are the sectors where you need to have the most important growth that are driving also the rest of the economies, such as the energy, where we believe that there is an important opportunity really to bring more private capital. But to do that as well, you need also to conduct the necessary reform, the regulatory environment to be looked at, how to bring the IPPs, and how to develop also the connectivity in the country for better access to for the population. In Africa, you have 600 million persons who do not have access to electricity today. It's 2 times the population of a country like the United States. This is the amplitude. So to come back to my initial point, that's why we're saying the speed, the scale, and the impact is fundamental. But also, what kind of financing instrument we need to develop to address those specific needs.
Now, one of the issue here that critics argue is the fact that the World Bank's mechanism does not provide enough leverage to help African countries reduce debt. What is your reaction, and how does the World Bank support African nations in restructuring their debt and improving risk assessment?
Well, I will beg to differ on the role of the World Bank not supporting the African Council, or not enough. Okay. I will say that the bank has been there since inception, independence of the countries, in providing the capacities that are needed when it comes to access to resources. It started by providing what we call cheap financing, which we call concessional resources. In most of our developing countries, they benefit from those kind of instruments. This is one. Second, in terms of restructuring, exactly as you said, well, the bank has been working also with the IMF, for instance, in the context of the G20 Common Framework to help debt restructuring for some of the African countries, and we've seen the positive outcome on that. And the last point I will mention here is under the financing mechanism we have for the least developed countries, which is called the IDA. Actually, there are some specific instruments that are meant really to help the countries do debt restructuring, credit rating, creditors outreach, but also supporting, I would say, the governance and the capacity building in the finance ministry in the ways they negotiate also the future credit going forward.
And climate action in Africa is gaining momentum. The report recommends ensuring that financing climate goals does not come at the expense of development goals, and forcing African countries to choose between development and the preservation of the planet. In your view, what can be done to reconcile this?
Well, what we are looking at, and this is something also coming from the report from Mo Ibrahim, but also reform we have been conducting at the World Bank. What we have been saying as an African constituency, the point is not about climate versus development.
Okay.
And it's not development versus climate. So the two has to come together. We see the impact of climate on the sustainable development today. Therefore, what we are saying, we need right balance on climate and development, but financing also on both the mitigation and adaptation side for African countries. Hence the importance, once again, of additional resources to combat that front, because sustainable climate means also sustainable development going forward.